Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Arlington County Police Practices Group live stream event on the traffic enforcement subgroup. Our subgroup is today putting on this presentation to help you learn with us about some potential alternatives to traditional traffic enforcement by police officers. So our subgroup is made up of 5 members who are part of the Arlington PPG. Myself, my name's Allison Carpenter, Cicely Whitfield, Whitney Kernodle, Scott Wanick, and Kathleen McSweeney. We are the members of the subgroup dedicated to traffic enforcement. And today we are very fortunate to have a guest speaker who is local to our area. Her name is Wen Hu. She is a senior research transportation engineer at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. She has her PhD in civil engineering from Penn State University. She joined the Institute in 2010, and she has been involved in researching topics such as speeding, automated enforcement, and roundabouts. Notably, she wrote an article and contributed to an article in 2014 that was published in the Journal of Safety Research on the topic of the effects of red light camera enforcement on red light violations in Arlington County, Virginia. And then a second article about the effects of turning on and off red light cameras on fatal crashes in large US cities, and that was from 2017. So we are very fortunate to have such a scholar in our community who is not only local to Arlington, but who has also studied Arlington as one main area where enforcement cameras have been used and are used. And I'd like to welcome her today. Wen, are you there?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So what we'd like to have you do is just speak for a little bit, as long as you would like, about what you studied starting in 2014 and 2017. And then after all of that, we will follow up with any questions.
Sure. Sounds good. All right, I'll share my screen. Okay, can everyone see me?
Yes, we can see you
good.
on the screen. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. So as Alice said, I am local to Arlington, and I work for IIHS, which is a nonprofit organization which is dedicated to improve highway safety. So today I am going to give you some information on the latest research on automated enforcement. So before we get into the research part, I want to first give you some information on the automated enforcement laws in Virginia. You might already know this, or you'll know even better than I do, but here's some information. So in Virginia, both red light cameras and speed cameras are allowed. And speed cameras are only allowed in school zones and highway work zones. And there are limits to the fines, and the both fully enforced the red light or speeding violations are treated as civil offenses. So the first red light camera study I'm going to talk about is the one we did in Arlington about 8 years ago. So at the time of our study, there were only 4 red light cameras in Arlington. I believe currently there are more than 4. So in our study, we had the different analysis group. The first group includes the 4 intersections with red light cameras in Arlington. And we also have a spillover group, which consisted of 4 signalized intersections without red light cameras in Arlington County. We selected this group to study if there's any spillover effects of red light cameras in Arlington to these intersections without red light cameras, because there are previous research showing that the effects of the red light cameras spill over to nearby non-camera intersections within the same community. And the third group is a control group, which consisted of 4 signalized intersections in Fairfax County. This is to control for factors that could have affected the red light violations, such as weather, traffic. So for the study, we collected violation data during the warning period and 1 month and 1 year after the ticketing began. So for this study, we didn't get to collect the violations before the red light cameras were installed. So we kind of treated the data we collected during the warning period as the before data. So the main finding of the study, we examined the effects of the red light cameras on the probability of red light violations at these intersections with cameras. The main finding is that there were significant reductions in the likelihood of red light violations at these intersections 1 year after ticketing began. We also examined these effects by the violations by the seconds elapsed after the light had turned red. What we found was that the reduction in the likelihood of red light violations were greater the longer after the light had turned red, and when the violations were more likely to cause crashes. We also found reductions in the probabilities of red light violations at 2 non-camera intersections near these 4 camera intersections, but these reductions were not significant. So that's the study in Arlington. Our latest red light camera research was to examine the effects of red light cameras on fatal crash rates in the large US cities. So for this part of analysis, we included 57 cities that had red light cameras, as well as the 33 cities without red light cameras as the control. And we compared the trends in the fatal crash rates at signalized intersections in the cities with cameras with the trends in the cities without red light cameras. And our analysis accounted for the effects of the population density and the unemployment rates. So what we found was that there was a 21% reduction in the fatal crash rates at signalized intersections. And we also found there were 14% reduction in all the fatal crashes at intersections with signal lights. So for the same study, we also examined the effects of turning off red light cameras on fatal crashes in some of the large US cities. So for this study, we included 14 US cities that terminated their red light camera programs during 2010 to 2014. And for the control group, we included 29 cities with continuous red light camera enforcement. And these control cities, they matched these cities without which turned off the red light cameras regionally. We compared the trends in the fatal crash rates between these 2 study groups. And we also accounted for the population density and the unemployment rates. So what we found was that in these large US cities that turned off their red light camera programs, the fatal red light running crash rates at signalized intersections were 30% higher than what would have been expected if the cameras remained. And also there was a 16% increase in the all the fatal crashes at signalized intersections associated with turning off red light cameras. So based on these findings, we calculated the number of lives saved or lost by this red light as a result of using red light cameras or turning off red light camera. So during 1992 to 2014, in the 79 cities with red light cameras, there were about 1,300 lives saved by these camera programs. And in the 14 cities that ended the red light cameras during 2010 to 2014, 63 lives were lost due to turning off these red light cameras. And people also, we also heard this saying that people don't like red light cameras and there are concerns. So we did a survey of the residents in these 14 US cities with red light cameras a few years ago, almost 10 years ago. And we found that in these 14 cities with red light camera programs, a majority of the residents favored red light cameras. About 2 years ago, IIHS, together with some of the other road safety organizations, published a checklist for red light camera programs. So the purpose of publishing this checklist is to help the communities to build and maintain public support for these red light camera programs. So I think the main point is to bring the public along during the entire process and keep the program transparent to the public. Let the public know that there's a safety problem of red light running and the benefits of red light cameras, so that the public knows that running red light cameras is not about profit, it's about public safety. So this checklist is available on IIHS website, and I'm happy to send you like a copy if you couldn't find it online. So next, I'm going to just briefly talk about speed camera research we did. So this is a study we did in Montgomery County, Maryland, a few years ago. So Montgomery County is the first community in Maryland to use the speed cameras. Their speed cameras are limited to school zones and the residential streets. And there's a $40 fine, and it's also treated as civil offenses. So for this study, we examined the effects of the speed cameras on speeds as well as on severe injury crashes. So what we found was that about 7.5 years after Montgomery County started their automated speed enforcement, there was a over 60% reduction in the likelihood of the drivers exceeding speed limit by more than 10 miles per hour at these camera sites. And there was also almost 40% reduction in the likelihood that a crash involved severe or fatal injury crashes on these camera eligible roads. We also surveyed the residents in Montgomery County during the enforcement programs. We 6 months after the ticketing began, as well as 7.5 years after the ticketing began, we found that during both surveys, over 60% of the residents actually favored these speed cameras used on the targeted roads. So that's all I have for today. Feel free to ask me if you have any question or comments. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Wen, for joining us. I'd like to open it for questions now. I don't know if other people have them. If you could raise your hand or write into the chat box if you do. Wen, I'll go ahead and start by asking, have you studied whether the number of cameras in a certain jurisdiction or in a certain square mileage area has any impact on their effectiveness? Like, do they, you know what I mean? Is there such thing as too many or too few to be effective, or is it really just intersection by intersection? You're on mute, actually.
We didn't study like the effects of like the density of the cameras. Yeah, so in our study, it's either have a red light camera program or not, but we didn't get to study like the effects of the number of red light cameras on violations or crashes.
Okay. Can you go back to the criteria that helped you determine which intersections to study?
We do not get involved in the site selection for their red light camera enforcement. So each community, they select the sites for camera enforcement. And what we did was that because we tracked like which communities in the U.S. Have red light camera programs. So and then like for example for the large city U.S. study. So basically, we selected this study based on their population to be qualified for the large U.S. cities. But we don't get involved in like which intersections, like what is the criteria for the red light camera enforcement.
In looking at the 2014 study, it talked about how it one of the conclusions was that it reduced red light violations. Can you talk about how you compared the data of violations prior to having the cameras up and post having the cameras up?
So, so what we did is that we collect violations during the before period, and then after the ticketing began, we just basically repeated the data collection. And so we compared the violation before and after, and then we compared the change among different study groups. So that's how we got our conclusion. So yeah, you mean? Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So if you mean the number of the violations, I don't have the numbers with me right now, but it's in the paper. I can send you the paper. It has the number of violations before and after.
Is the data that you got for beforehand, I assume, is just from like the police department number of violations or crash data or something like that?
So it's the red light violation data. We didn't get that data from the police department. We basically hire a contractor, and they videotaped the traffic during this study, different data collection periods, and then they watched the video and coded the red light violations by reviewing the videos. So it's the data independently collected by IIHS.
All right. Let's see. I have a couple other questions. How have you determined whether there are other solutions that should be employed to slow down traffic or to make intersections more safe? For example, re-engineering the intersection.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
There's a second part of the question, but I'll let you answer the first part and then I'll ask the follow-up.
So yeah, there are definitely other like solutions or engineering treatments to reduce radar running. One of the treatment could be roundabouts. We also studied roundabouts, and we found roundabouts are very effective in reducing like traffic congestion and crashes. Yeah, there are different various treatments, and yeah, I think the communities should like they can do their judgment and see which treatment fits best for their intersections.
So the follow-up question to that was, I assume that speed cameras are cheaper solutions, but are there criteria you apply?
There are so compared to,
I think cameras versus re-engineering intersections. If there's, you know, financially, it would seem that cameras would be more cost effective. But I think the questioner is wondering whether there are other criteria other than cost that help you determine if re-engineering versus a camera would be more effective.
We I don't have information for that. We haven't done any like cost-effective study on the speeding treatments. But there are definitely other like low-cost treatments to reduce speeding, such as like speed humps, things like that. But yeah, we haven't compared the costs of speed cameras to other like treatments.
One question is about looking at the use of a camera versus the use of a live police force. Is that something that you took into consideration when doing the two studies?
So for our study, we have sites with these cameras, and as well as control sites without these cameras. So we didn't collect information on the police enforcement activities. So we just assume regular police enforcement at these sites without cameras. Yeah, we haven't compared these different formats of enforcement. But we think relay cameras, because these cameras are there like 24/7. Yeah, I guess they're pretty effective.
All right. I'm looking through the list. Have you or any of your colleagues looked at the demographics related to violations?
No.
Okay. Can you share a little more about the work of IIHS and the areas of focus for current and or future studies?
IIHS, so we, our research basically covers almost every aspect of road safety. So I'm the transportation engineer, so my research covers like engineering treatment, speeding, speed limits, like roundabouts, intersection safety. And we also have researchers that covers human factors, and we also have a vehicle research center, which do research related to vehicles. So we have our crash test. We have our vehicle like safety rating every year, and we have also been doing research on these the advanced driver assistance technologies and these automated vehicles. So basically, yeah, every aspect of highway safety.
All right, thank you. One of our members has her hand up. So Kathleen, if you want to ask your question live, go ahead and unmute.
Thanks so much, and thank you very much for your presentation. I felt like it was unfair to Allie to make her ask all the questions. So I'm interested in what you're finding about the accuracy of red light and speed cameras, because well, some members have raised that as an issue in our community, that, sometimes people are issued tickets for which they are not actually the car that was doing the violation. Somehow it, was a little fast or something on the camera. I'll ask that first, and then I have a follow-up.
We haven't examined the accuracy of these the cameras, but in our checklist, in our one-page checklist, we suggest that each community should regularly check their the cameras to make sure they work appropriately.
Is there periodic, does somebody have to go out and check the cameras regularly? Is there some sort of process that's followed to make sure they're accurate?
Yeah, I think according to my conversation with some of these communities, which run good programs, they do have either technicians or someone to go to the field and check these cameras to make sure they're accurate.
And the second part of this is about sort of the equity. Do you have any sort of sliding scale for people who actually get tickets based on income, just to make sure that lower income members of our community are not paying more, proportionally than other people in the community?
No, we haven't looked at that. No, we haven't done research on that part.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm checking to see if we have any other questions. I think that we may have covered all of the questions, at least the ones that I received. Does anyone else want to jump in with a question before we let one go?
I think Scott and Matt had a question. I'm not sure if it got to the chat box.
Okay, I see Scott's hand raised, so Scott, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank you for coming in. I don't really have a question as much as I do an observation. I think from a law enforcement perspective, cameras are a great idea. I mean, anything that we can do to reduce the amount of crashes, both with injury and fatalities in Arlington County, I think that's in everybody's best interest. And it also frees up, can free up unobligated time for our officers to do substantial police work. I would also just mention that I think it's an excellent tool to be used in conjunction with uniformed officers who are out there proactively patrolling the community. Part of the data that I provided to the subcommittee in scores of cases where officers performing discretionary traffic stops discovered much larger crimes involving distribution of narcotics and illegal firearms that likely would not have been detected but for that ability to perform discretionary traffic enforcement. And there's a net how do you say consequence to public safety, I guess, when we talk about replacing uniformed traffic activities with a device even as effective as the red light and speed cameras. So that would be my less of a question, more of a comment. I think it's a great tool. Thank you for explaining it in the detail that you did and performing the study. And yeah, I think a great tool to be used in concert with patrol officers who are also trying to protect the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wen, it looks like we do have another question.
Sure.
Have you researched the privacy issues with respect to cameras, whether in the surveys that you've done or otherwise?
No, no, we didn't. Our surveys didn't cover that part.
All right, thank you. All right, if no one else has any questions, then we will let you go. Thank you again so much for both having done this and having joined us today.
Thank you, my pleasure. And you have my contact information. If you have any follow-up questions, just feel free to shoot me an email. Or if you think there's any opportunity for IIHS to study, feel free to reach me. And we're always happy to explore more research ideas to improve safety.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye. So I think that is it for today. And I will thank you everyone from the community who joined us. And we look forward to updating everyone as we continue to research and look into other things.
Allison?
Yes, Kathleen?
Sorry, this is Kathleen. We do have another question, and I'm wondering if we couldn't take some time to actually ask the people who've joined us on this call to help us by providing some additional information or ideas. I know that Elizabeth Valderrama asked, what else is the group talking about focusing on in addition to cameras? And so we were also we were looking at traffic stops in general, not only motor vehicle, but also walking and biking. You know, any time that a citizen could get stopped. You know, why are they getting stopped and how are they getting stopped and what's the outcome of those stops? We don't have information gathered on that yet, but I'm wondering again if it would be worthwhile to ask people what kind of things they'd like us to study or to look at, or what other questions they might have.
Sure. And to clarify, do you mean other people who are on live right now with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we could just ask for a general call for if people have issues or ideas about other things we should look at related to this.
I don't know if Elizabeth had sent a message. Elizabeth, would you like to?
Sure. Hi. I just I'm very excited about what we learned today about the work, but I also just wanted to just double check, and I think Kathleen answered some of it about what other elements you all have been focusing on as you're moving through with the group specifically about traffic enforcement. I know that there's there's things that we hear often about as it relates to driving while black. Is something that we all have heard about, and so I would love to kind of hear about what, if anything, the group is going to be looking at and how to support or figure out how to try to fix something along those lines. So that was really kind of where I was going. So thank you.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that first, and then I will let anyone else from the group jump in as well. So what we've been focusing on thus far is looking at what some other jurisdictions are doing in this area to see what alternate options are out there. One is acknowledging the problem. Obviously, one of our main focuses is making sure that whatever is done equitably and fairly, and that it's being tracked in a way that we can ascertain whether that is the case or not. And so a lot of what our group has done is made requests of certain data about, for anything, for example, from geographic locations of stops to reasons for stops, and the demographics of all of those things. There's a long list of that. We are still in the process of getting that information back and reviewing it. Some of the it's told us so far a lot about what is being collected. For everyone else's information, as of July 1st, the Virginia Community Policing Act took effect, and that requires a lot more data to be collected based on every single stop that happens by law enforcement across the state. And so we are taking a look at some of what was collected beforehand, some of what's collected after that point, how broad the scope of that is, and really taking a look at what the information is, and by doing so, looking both at what the results of the information is, but also maybe some information that we've been interested in but isn't being collected in a readily available way. We have viewed our group as not just being limited purely to traffic stops, but also including bike stops or pedestrian stops or things like that, because it doesn't really involve any other group. So we haven't limited solely to car stops. We also anticipate being able to run some ratios, maybe about searches, consent to searches, and all of those sorts of things. I will add that prior to July 1st, 2020, police departments across the state were only required to track the race of people who were stopped and not the ethnicity. But now, after July 1st, ethnicity is an additional category. So that is, that is one of the main information points that is pretty different after July 1st. I'm looking at some other, we're interested in understanding the reasons for the stops, the outcome of those stops, including everything from verbal warning to written warning to some sort of traffic ticket or infraction, some sort of traffic crime, or some criminal charge that was unrelated to traffic. And taking a look at whether the charge was related to the reason for the stop and that sort of thing. I don't know, Kathleen is adding a few things. So Kathleen, please feel free to jump in if you'd like.
Sure. We also talked about briefly about whether police actually need to do traffic enforcement. There are other places in the country that have looked at having the trained citizens, people who are employed, obviously, and trained, do traffic stops versus police. We had, one of the other things we were looking at, and I was a little late to this call, so it's possible that you all talked about this, but looking at this group and where we intersect with, Vision Zero work that is also being done to, coordinate and reduce speed limits and therefore, reduce deaths. But really anything related to enforcement is something that should be on the table for us to look at, traffic enforcement and stopping of citizens and speeding and bicycle and pedestrian safety. That's all, part of this. I'm seeing Bryna actually put something in the chat that we might want to raise.
Yeah, and Devanshi isn't on here, but I do think our group intersects with a couple other groups. One is we have a question for Naomi about whether Naomi would like to share any of the insights that the Mental Health and Policing Subcommittee has gathered that could be helpful to this group. And if anyone from the Alternate Dispute Resolution group has anything to add, I think that would lend itself to some suggestions for our committee as well. So I don't want to put Naomi on the spot, but if anyone from that group has any suggestions, feel free to jump in. And there's also a question for Latasha, if you would like to talk about what has changed in data collection since July 1st.
Good afternoon. So there's 4 additional things that data collection in terms of traffic stops includes now. Is the reason for the stop was the person arrested who was driving Was the vehicle searched or any passengers searched as well? So those are the additions to the requirement. Before we did collect ethnicity, it was just not required.
Great, thank you. If no one else has any comments, then, oh, it looks like Scott has his hand up, so go ahead, Scott.
Hey, am I there? Can you hear me? Yeah, we're talking about, I guess when the mood starts to talk about replacement of traffic enforcement, I guess I have to, just offer you this. I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago about the scores of cases where officers conducting discretionary traffic enforcement are finding cases of, distribution of narcotics and illegal firearms and other crimes, other major crimes as a result of their discretionary traffic enforcement, which that does not get detected by red light cameras or speed humps or anything like that. These are all things that need to be worked, I think, together in concert so that we don't have to discover those types of crimes as a result of, drug overdoses, shootings, or robberies. We can catch them during a discretionary traffic enforcement encounter. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, you mentioned, Allison, the Virginia Community Policing Act. Not only does it require the collection of all that data, but it also requires the public dissemination of that, which gives the public an opportunity to look at the practices of each police department in the state of Virginia, both by policy and in practical application. And if there are any anomalies that are causing some kind of unfairness, which none of our officers are interested in doing, we don't have any officers in our department that want to go out there and be unfair to anybody. By and large, we have intrinsically motivated people who want to go out there and do a great job. And part of that great job that they do is interdicting criminal elements that come into Arlington County through the use of discretionary traffic enforcement. And I think the appropriate tool is the well thought out Virginia Community Policing Bill Act that we now are, is going to be part and parcel to every police department, disseminating that information to the public so it can be fully reviewed and accounted for. And if there are changes that need to be made, those can be suggested to the police department, and they should be receptive to that, because any chance that we get to do a better job for the community, we're gonna jump at it. That'd be my comment. Thank you.
Elizabeth, Kathleen, feel free to go ahead.
No, I appreciate, Scott's comments, and I've heard you say that many times. I guess I just want to make sure there is an element, we all have biases, right? And so there is an element of bias in some of what you've said. And so I feel the need to say that, and so the question is, how do we protect against acting on those biases? Who is it that's being stopped? And I know we don't have all that data, but who is it that's being stopped? And how much further do you go, based on what you're observing, just, quickly about the person? Certainly if people are acting nervous or people, I understand that there are certain tells probably. But I also think we need to talk about, the other possibilities that, too many Black people are being stopped.
I saw Cicely's hand up, so thank you, Kathleen. And Cicely is another member of our subcommittee, so I'd like her to be able to weigh in here.
I am so thankful that Kathleen said what she said. I was just on another meeting with you, Scott, so I literally just heard you say that. And I am concerned. I know of a couple of examples where folks have literally been stopped because of the kind of car they drive, and it seems suspicious to Arlington County Police. And that's not okay. So I guess my question then becomes, what is considered quote unquote suspicious to Arlington County Police Department that causes us to make these stops? That's all I have to say.
Elizabeth, jump in.
Thank you. Yes, both agree with what Cecily's saying, and also Kathleen. I think the other piece I wanted to add is the reality of, like, the traffic stop is happening because there was potentially a violation that occurred that's visual to the person, right, the officer. There was something a moment ago about, like, in those traffic stops, then we can determine if they have drugs or weapons or something like. And I just want to, I think it's one really important element of this work, that the goal is not to be looking for extra stuff in the person's car, right? The goal is to just ensure that the driving or the walking is safer for that person in the community. And so I would like to just, as the traffic enforcement or the group is looking at things, to look at both, to separate the element of, like, the goal is to just make sure that person isn't speeding anymore because it'd be safer for the community, or the person isn't running a red light or isn't crossing illegally on the street, not to then be able to search them for drugs and weapons. So I just want to, I don't want it to be conflated, because it actually shouldn't be. And I just I wanted to bring that up. And also because then at some point, we're also then looking for excuses to specifically search cars and specifically search people and those kinds of things. And we can, of course, justify any possible thing as something as an excuse for us to, to be able to search their cars and find additional issues. So I just, I worry about how officers see their role in the community, as opposed to just, it's like, hey, we just want to make sure the person gets home safely, and not that we're going to then search for all these other things. That's not really what the role of the police is. So that's my thoughts. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's feedback. I got a few.
Hey, Allison.
Yes. I got a few other questions on Facebook as well.
I bet you did. I just wanted to respond to those comments. I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate the input. I would say, first of all, I think the goal of our police officers in Arlington County is public safety. And if there's a vehicle that's driving around with a large quantity of narcotics and illegal firearms, and their intent is to commit larger crimes, and that becomes apparent to a police officer who's conducting a discretionary traffic stop, I think the vast majority of Arlington citizens are going to be for that. So I would say that public safety is the goal. And if that includes getting someone home safely at night, which is by far probably the most common result, somebody either gets a traffic ticket or a warning, whether that's verbal or in writing. About 23 to 25% of our motorists who get pulled over get verbal or written warnings. So it's public safety is the goal, and I think the officers that we employ, the officers that we attract, and thankfully are able to retain, are high quality, well-educated, well-trained, thoughtful, compassionate officers. I mean, we've been at this for a long time. I've done some talking. Matt's done some talking. Latasha's done some talking. We've had guest speakers in. I would be doing a disservice, and I just, if I didn't reiterate that we're all very lucky, I think, in Arlington County to have the caliber of officer that we have here, and the quality of work that they tend to do on behalf of the public for Arlington County. So I'm really proud of them. I know that the majority of citizens are, as is evidenced by the 2018 citizen satisfaction survey, which gave us an 86% rating. That always leaves us 16% to 14% to improve, and we're looking to improve, which is why we're all part of this group, and this is why I sit on this panel, so that I can hear this input, which I appreciate, and we can use it to do better. We can always do better, but I just, I'm hearing the comments, and I just had to say that our officers are really good. And there's cities that don't have as good of officers. And I think when a lot of this, when we start coming up with solutions to the real problems that we see out there, Arlington is going to be a template for agencies that aren't doing as well. So we're looking to improve. We're looking to find solutions to real problems, and we're looking to be a participant in that process. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy for your comments, but I did feel the need to just interject that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say to everyone's comments, and I know there's a lot of hands that went back up. I'm getting a number of comments, and I'm sorry, I don't have Facebook on since we're live through Teams right now through the county, but I'm getting some questions copied and pasted to me. And so I really do want, for example, questions about reasons that Arlington police are stopping people, use of police resources and things like that. It seems like those are some of the questions that people are asking. What I'd like to say is that we are looking into the data behind all of that. We view that as one of the main charges of our subgroup. Really, the question is allocation of resources, where the resources are being used, how they're being used, what are the results of the use of the community, of the police resources that are going out. For example, Scott brought up a survey, and so some of our suggestions may be surveying procedures. Who's getting surveyed? Who's weighing in on that? Who's being asked to weigh in on that? And how certain do we feel that we're getting an accurate cross-section of survey participants? So I do want to add that this group, we're also getting some questions about people walking and being stopped while walking. I do want to assure people that we view that as part of this subgroup's charge as well. It's not purely limited to a vehicle stop by one vehicle or another, but we're looking at really random police contacts, if you will, including by bicycle or by walking. There is a lot of look into data that's going on. I think we're in the beginning of the data collection and I would say research process, looking into all of that. And so I do want to assure everyone, we may not have some of those answers today. In fact, we don't have many of those answers today, but we very much view that as part of our subgroup's charge and something that our subgroup will not be resting until we have that data and make suggestions accordingly. And if some data is not available, then that's the sort of thing that we would view ourselves as making a suggestion to the county that we would like that sort of thing. So there's a number of hands up. I would like to let Whitney go ahead and speak because she is a member of our subgroup. So Whitney.
Hi, thank you. So I think one of the things that we're digging deep on or trying to is Arlington persistently and in every capacity in the schools and the police, just in the county in general, there is a lack of acknowledgement of the systemic racism that has existed. And it's going to be fairly impossible for us to really do this hard work to the best that we can without acknowledging that. The disproportionality in data speaks for itself. The lived experiences of Black people and others speaks for itself. We have to be careful when we're talking to people. So I have a son who's been stopped while walking with friends because they're Black. So we have to be careful as a society and as our police department, our county in general, in telling Black people that there is no racism while they're experiencing it. We have to be very careful about that. And we are naive to think that in America, that each and every police officer has anti-racist intent. It's incredibly naive. And there are all sorts of people who can tell you exactly which officers they are. So we really have to the systemic racism has to be acknowledged. It is what it is. It's factual, try to take the emotion out of it. But that's what this country was based on. It's what this county was based on. It's what the police department was based on. And we have to just start with that.
All right. I think on that note, we're going to go off the air. We thank everyone for joining us today. We would like to hear people's feedback. Please go on the county website on the PPG Police Practices Group and put your comments online. The county also did launch a new program last week, Dialogues on Race and Equity. And since I assume many of the people joining today are interested in that as well, please go ahead and look into that. That may be something that you would like to participate in as well. We continue to encourage people to send in feedback, not just on my subgroup, but on any of the subgroups or any of the areas that are being looked into. And we appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you and have a great night.